Soul Tree. Let's transform together.
Hey, welcome to the Soul Tree podcast. Meet my dog. I know some of you can't see him. He's very nice and a cute little guy. And today I have an episode with Darren Silver. Darren Silver has his master's in the initiation, the mythology of initiation. And there's a lot in that I think is pretty cool as far as relating to the old stories and understanding how we all need to be initiated and seeing how we can relate to these characters. So we get into that a little bit. We also talk about some broader topics in regards to, purpose and meaning and living a grounded, soul-directed life as we called it. And before I hand you over to Darren, I just wanted to say that I do have a Patreon account, and if you feel inspired to donate, there is a link here in the description. Go ahead and click that. Also, subscribe and like or comment, share, whatever you feel inspired to do to support this podcast is much appreciated. And I hope you all are doing wonderful. And I'm excited to share this episode with you, and I hope you enjoy it. Just to say one last thing here, there was a little audio problem there at the beginning, so you're going to miss about 10 minutes of our initial conversation. But don't worry, we get into the juicy stuff pretty quick. But what you do need to know is that briefly Darren introduced himself, and we talked about some things in his path that were important. So I'm going to include his bio in the description so you can learn a little bit about him, some of the stuff that you missed there in the first 10 minutes. Darren is cool and awesome, and I'm excited to share him with the world, so please enjoy. What is transformation, and what is initiation, and what are these things that you're passionate about? Like, that's what I'm really fascinated about. How do you relate to those topics? How do you present those to people? What is the voice or the language that you put to that underlying vision that you talked about?
Yeah. It's my dance with initiation is interesting because, I started having my own experiences of this, going through Lodge for years, and then going on Vision Quest and having these very initiatory moments, initiatory experiences. And then simultaneously, I began to study it academically. And then simultaneously, I ended up working in the field of wilderness therapy, working with adjudicated teens and working with at-risk teens in the community and the place that I lived at that time.
Wow.
So I had this so I kind of find myself in this dance of, wow, academically and almost ethnographically putting on my anthropology lens, can look historically at cultures at what initiation was. And then I can pull from my own experiences and begin to ask what's possible today with initiation and rites of passage. And then when those two come together and then include my experiences, I have my own ideas that are all together a little bit abstract in the sense that I don't know what it would be like to guide youth through a certain experience. So when you ask me the question, I'm wondering, okay, how am I going to answer this? What's most inspiring to me is this kind of edge that I'm pushing. After working quite intentionally in rites of passage programs for teens, and mentoring and studying it, I have some contributions I want to make, and or some inquiries that I have that I want to pursue through my own lens. And one of them is I'm not sure if the initiatory process for adolescents in the past was as emphasized on them as it is now.
Say more about that.
And I also think that a lot of the rites of passage programs that take place today, the people who get the most out of it are the parents, because
Wow.
because they actually can relax into a sense of finally having a village, even if it's for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Finally having a sense of, whoa, my son is contained into something, or my daughter is contained in something much bigger, is held in something much bigger. However transient it may be, whether a week or two program. The parents, in my view, come away with more than the teens do.
Yeah. So so I just want to make sure I'm understanding clearly. Is that is that because historically speaking, the initiation was really about the teens stepping into more responsibility?
Hmm.
Is that you said what you said was that it's too focused, or it's way more focused on them now?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm taking the long way home to get there. So
Oh, okay. That's what came up for me, is this idea that like maybe in the past it was like, you're an adult now, it's time to go hunting, it's time to take care of the farm, like you don't have a choice. That's kind of what came up for me.
you know, I just yeah. So I question that.
Okay.
I question how much it was for the individual, and my understanding and what I'm working with, and I'm sharing with you like kind of currently what's going on in my mind, and so some of the stuff I can't prove,
Hmm.
but I'm under the influence of the idea um, that initiation is really the process of learning about culture, and culture is the container in which holds a people and directs their attention towards their relationship to the place that they live.
Mm-hmm.
And so when one goes through initiation, they're actually learning really how to be in relationship with the place that they live and have some responsibility towards stewarding it, or being in the essence of perpetuation of the place that they live.
Right. It's for the group to some extent, right? It's for the
Well,
greater good.
it's not even for the group, it's for the very place that they live.
Oh, I see.
So culture is the system which puts them into deeper connection with that place. And so what I'm working with is initiation is the process of learning that, is the process of learning. And so, for example, there may have been the teachings of certain stories that were only told during initiation, stories that were in connection with a particular place. So it told them of the creation of that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only by telling the story and reenacting with the initiates did they ensure that that place continued to exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the initiates then gained the responsibility of perpetuating the existence of that place. So certainly they would have had to encounter themselves in that process and their own limitations. But it was really oriented towards a connection to place. How that may be expressed is certain beadwork, a certain story, a certain particular pattern painted on a hide.
Mm-hmm.
It was wrought with connection
Mm.
with a particular place. So can we do that today? Well, it's a way far-fetched dream that I hold, but to me, that's the process of really becoming a human being. One that can deeply have a sense of connection with place that's culturally enforced. We don't have that. We don't even have a culture. We have an industrial society. Our
Right.
culture in no way brings us in connection with the place.
Yeah, it does feel kind of just ultimately corporate, doesn't it? Just everything that we're surrounded with in the cities or the towns that we live in.
Yeah, it doesn't really reflect um, the expression of that place.
Yeah.
There's a mythologist, Sean Kane, and also a mythologist, Martin Shaw, who has used this quote and probably reached more people with it, that myth is the power of a place speaking. And by telling it, we are telling that song back to the place itself.
Okay.
And so
Got it.
culture, in the way, in my view, is a similar thing. Like the way our homes are built, the clothing that we wear, the language that we speak, all the artifacts that we hold are an expression of that place being told back to itself.
Got it.
And so there's this beautiful conversation going on all the time. To me, that is what is learned in initiation.
Got it. So let me make sure.
Let me just say one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Like, in a lot of cultures, you're not quite a human being until you go through initiation. Initiation being, between 12 and 15, 16. So that begs the question of like, okay, so what makes a genuine human being today? And that's a question I'm deeply asking. And what's in the way of that? So yeah.
Right, because we don't have any real initiations in our culture. We don't have any. It's not a marked process anymore. I mean, maybe church is like the closest. Being baptized, it might be like the closest thing I can think of, or graduating from college or high school. Those are like the closest things I can think of to something significantly marking some sort of human transformation. The other thing that's fascinating is this emphasis on place versus just being, right? Like I transform so I can be greater or be more or be better, versus like I transform into relationship with this place, this earth, this, literal land that I live on. And I feel like that's such a foreign concept to a lot of Westerners.
Mm-hmm.
So feel free to elaborate on any of that, whatever feels charged.
Yeah. Well, some time ago through some, I don't want to get into the history of it right now, but there was significant through the scientific revolution and through displacement over centuries, that when we lost that sense of connection to place, and it became really, really easy to objectify the natural world and objectify matter. Me knowing you, Ryan, like I can probably imagine that we share this experience, that when we carve a Bodro kit and we make a fire with it, there is something that changes in our soul. There is something that changes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense, what I would call, of like homeness. We feel at home in a way.
Right.
Something where the soul goes, I'm finally here.
Mm-hmm.
Similar thing when we grow our own food and we get to eat it. I mean, dinner is so much better when it came from locally, or we harvest meat or wild craft. I mean, I'm drinking a tea from my land right now, from mint.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
There's something there's like something in that.
Yeah.
So I'm giving a pretty simple example to reimagining physical matter as having essence, of having soul, of having something that has an impact on us. And so when we live in a world that the actual physical world around us has been totally pilfered and totally, I have no idea where some of the materials came, in my house. There's a sense of like, that's one thing. And a man named Martin Prechtel is really talking about that a lot. But more so, like, there's something that historically has happened that gives us a sense of permission that we can do that. That the earth doesn't have an essence, that we don't have to ask permission. And from studying with Tom Brown as I do, that's the first thing you do. Is you ask permission, because you're recognizing that life force exists, and whether you're harvesting chokecherry for a bow staff,
Right.
it's yeah. So if you hold that, then our transformation is absolutely bound to it. We feel the seasons move through us, even in the course of a day,
Mm,
in the course of a year, in the course of a lifetime.
right. Well, so much of the culture of, you know, transformation and growth, right? Like we're a big growth society, personal growth, financial growth, everything's about growth, right? And so when we think of psychology, when we think of spirituality, we immediately go to growth. We have to somehow, supercharge. And to me, the mainstream, you could call it new age philosophy, you could call it whatever you want, but the mainstream thinking of people who are involved in any transformational circles whatsoever tends to be more about transcending and less about grounding into the planet, less about connecting to the earth. And so, there's this kind of upward urge that's really about like immaterial. It's not a material urge. It's very much about getting beyond the material. And then there's this downward urge that I think is less popular, that's really about rooting and, like you said, having a real relationship to this planet, to where we live, to, flesh and bones. And that can also be a very spiritual thing. But I just want to offer the distinction that that's an interesting, I don't think it's a fork in the road. It's just an interesting divergence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would associate the downward with more soul, and descent more with spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also in the initiatory journey, there is often described as part of the initiatory map as a descent. A descent downwards, and there's a mini death in that.
Mm.
There's a mini death in descent. There's mortality, and it doesn't surprise me that we live in a society that is absolutely terrified of death, that there will be a fascination for ascension.
Right. Yeah. Anything that gets us beyond the limitation or beyond the reality, like, physically. But the reason I love it, I mean, I joke about the image of the soul tree, but the reason I love it is because there is that balance of down and upward ascension. To me, the roots expanding down and the branches expanding out and up, to me, reflects a balance to strive for in our practice, in our whatever you want to call it, in our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's such an important reminder what you're saying, because I too forget about my relationship to place. I don't have the same land that you live on, which I'm sure helps with that, but also just, being surrounded by homes and cars and city and blah, blah, blah. I have to really make time. And I'm not sure what's true for you, but for me, I have to really make time every day to like go sit outside, to, connect, like feel my senses, like hear, taste, touch, like get into, and then like, if I'm lucky, maybe I'll have time to practice a primitive skill that gets me in touch in that way.
Yeah. Man, it's the same, totally
Same for you.
absolutely. And I mean, all the way. It's and these ideas about initiation and about culture, it's not like I have a sense of culture, it's, I mean, I'm like genuinely holding this question of maybe in something like some generations we can, and with a community, and with somebody tracking the whole story in multiple generations, we can remember the vibrations and song lines and patterns emanating from a place that can then inform us of something like a culture.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea of what it looks like. I'm just asking the question,
Yeah. Well, I went to Nepal a long time ago, and there's something so different when you go through those villages, right? I mean, I'm not talking about Kathmandu or the big city or whatever. I'm talking about like when you get really deep into the heart of the way the people live outside the city. And there's something so grounded about it. I mean, you just see people outside in their driveways, like hand washing their laundry, and like everything, the community just feels so dynamic and simple. It's so simple, but there's something so magical and foreign and like, seems to, there's something healthy about it, that they're eating the food from their backyard. They're not driving around in cars. They're not on their iPhones all day. They're just doing what they're doing. Very beautiful people, by the way. You would think that like modern people are like physically more attractive. They were so healthy and vibrant and fit, and it just blew me away. It almost brings up a sense of grief for me, because we could have that, man. We could have that, but instead we really focused, our society has really chosen to focus on technological revolution and industry. And not that any of those things are inherently bad, but there's something missing, like you said, there's that core piece of connection missing.
Mm-hmm.
It bums me out.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to travel, and I've traveled a bunch and experienced the same, the same type of grief, um, of which has always sent me back. I remember, so I went to India when I was 20, and just totally ridiculous. I don't know what I was thinking. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had a sense of, that's another way. I had a sense of like, of my country, having left my country, having left the United States. That, up until 20, I mean, like, I didn't really know what that meant to be an American until I left. And people would say, welcome to my country, or tell me how it is in your country. And I really began to reflect, like, whoa, like, yeah, my country. And I would as well be deeply impacted by the joy, the happiness. I mean, of course, not in the absence of difficulty or grief or greed or any of the things, but the sense of happiness was so much more apparent to me, traveling in India, for example, and the willingness to connect. But what happened for me was a sense of responsibility to back home,
Oh yeah?
because there's a part, for sure, I was like, wow, I can stay here, and I'll just stay here in this mountain village. That'd be great. And but it didn't occur to me, and I've had that since then. I mean, in recent years, traveling in Africa, and the Middle East, and going, whoa, I just hang here, but there's always something pulling me back here for a sense of responsibility.
Yeah. So where does that leave us? I mean, there's these strands of possibility here in this conversation. One is vision, and the other is kind of culture and society, and then there's also place. Those are the three that I've tracked so far. Do any of those feel particularly appealing to you?
It's up to you, man.
Okay, so here's what I want to offer real quick, because part of me is a little worried that we're just bumming each other out right now. So here's what I want to say.
Each other out?
Just being bummed out about shit, because well, that's how I've started to feel. I'm like, man, this is such a bummer. We're living in this bullshit society. And I'm sitting over here in my just totally just thinking like, oh, maybe I should just have a meltdown. But really, like, what I want to offer in lieu of that is that there has to be some integrative point where we can mend these gaps where, and I think like the work that you're doing, where you're doing soul initiation, where you're guiding people to that place inside of them that knows how to connect, that knows how to manifest in the direct environment something that would be good and useful. And that, to me, the integrity and the creativity of the individual seems to be the most promising route, rather than like focusing on these abstract, where it's so easy to talk about politics or culture and like how these systems need to change. And since I'm such a psychology guy, I'm such a personal transformation guy, I always have thought that like the best answer is to focus on changing yourself. And then that somehow, that ripples out. Like just the fact that I get to connect with you in a way, when I see you, I can feel your connection. And I mean that, like, that's not just a thing to say. So that connection that you've done for yourself somehow affects me, and somehow that ripples out some way or another. So really what I'm trying to lead us into here is a conversation about what are some of the essentials when we're talking about living a soul-directed life, living a, initiatory path maybe in a society or a culture that isn't popularizing that. I know that was a lot, man. Just take something and run with it. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, no, I'm like, all I can really say is what is most inspiring to me right now is for me to find like where is my creative imagination taking me when I'm in relationship to place. And I'm not talking place of like the whole earth. I mean, I'm talking about like a small patch that is easily accessible to me. Where does my creative, artistic, imagination take me? Am I able to hold a conversation with the land, take my questions into action and walk and stop and have a conversation? To me, that's a foundational thing for me to do. I have to do that. And what jumps up out of that is this whole, like, there's this grove where I live of, depending on what trees you include, like 9 or 12 trees. And immediately I walk into this grove and I have a deep sense of like, there is a conversation going on between these trees that is very important. And to me, I want to, ask permission and play in this space.
Right.
And then when I go into that space, what is it that happens for me? What is my experience?
Right. Yeah.
And then when I take somebody else into that and say, creatively follow what moves through you in relationship to this growth. And then those two things, my experience and someone else's experience, are 85% on the same page. That to me is something that is so going, okay, this place is emanating a particular pattern, a particular energy.
Right.
That we as humans can engage with, that can have a conversation with.
And if we were culturally aligned with that, that would create a whole mythology. That would create a whole story to always be telling and passing down and always be in conversation with.
It could,
Yeah.
And, yeah. And who knows what could jump over that. And maybe that conversation will the effect that it has on me is I feel a little bit more at home.
Right.
I feel a little bit more in my body, and a little bit more, in the greater body of the earth.
I love that.
And
And that's the essential piece of like the essential piece you're saying when you do that for yourself or when you do that for others, that makes such a huge difference for you.
makes a huge difference for me, but I also think it makes a huge difference in the place.
Oh, cool. Like it actually perceives it. It actually like feels it.
It absolutely, it wakes up. I mean, it awakens a place, you know?
I love that. There's this really huge cottonwood tree down the street that's about like a 5-minute walk with one of the biggest trees, you know, as far as wide, it's very wide. One of the widest trees I've ever seen. And that's my place. You know, I go to that place to purge out negative emotions, to just sit and connect to that tree. And for some reason, every time, it creates such a profound sense of meaning and connection in my life. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting in talking to you too, is that kind of stuff, like that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
I don't think most people can relate to that, which is sad.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm like wondering how to like really talk about this in a way that's understandable, because it's like we have such a unique training, you know, with Tom and with Earth-Based Institute and all of our background in your studies. And, you know, one of the hardest things that I've found traversing as a guide and a coach in this world is communicating that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You seem to be doing a better job of it than I've ever managed. Like in your description so far, I've never been able to like figure that out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's that's a driving question for me, you know,
How to bridge that?
how to bridge that. And, you know, one thing just did come up for me that, you know, like to go to those places, and ask what the place needs of us. I love doing that. Is there anything you need right now?
Right.
I'm like always going out there with my stuff, you know?
Right.
And to bring that element to it. I think what we have to do, Ryan, is there is through the years of entering ritual space, or as Michael Jospe would say, like a conscious experimentation with threshold, with the unknown. And doing that in relationship with nature, as much as we have, as I have, there's a process that takes place that we begin to back up, coupled with physical skills.
Like survival skills.
That there is a deconditioning of society that takes place. I'm particularly interested in that process. You know, what has allowed it that my mind actually, and how I perceive the world, is totally different for somebody. As you were just saying, I can look at a tree and hold a conversation with it, whereas somebody next to me who may not know will think I'm crazy.
Exactly. Well, most people, I would argue. Most people, some people even listening to this would. And so,
so the question is like, what is the process that has led our minds to think that we are so separate from the place where we live, from the place where we call home? What has led us to that? And what is the process that's going to bring us back?
Right.
And so I've spent a lot of time considering that. And
is that your vision? Part of your vision? I would never dare to limit your vision to one sentence.
I know. The thing with vision is like, you know, vision knows me better than I know myself. And so I'm really getting, you know, the last one to figure out what it is, you know. And
just following the strands.
So, but it is a question that's very, very inspiring to me. What is that process?
Mm-hmm.
historically that has led us so far away. I was listening to a talk recently by John Trudell, passed away a couple years ago. He was a Lakota activist, poet, musician, and he said any child who has turned against their mother is sick.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about the
Planet, right?
entire planet,
Mm-hmm.
and it just hit me in a way, like there's a sickness, and and I'm all about finding the solution, and uh, with creativity and artistry and beauty as much as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. You know, one thing that also strikes me as particularly rampant at this point is due to the scientific um, dominance of our world, of the Western world at least. There is this hesitancy to give credit to anything that's not within the empirical confines of science. And to me, you know, that's so limiting, because when you think about people like Carl Jung, who understood that it doesn't matter if it's in your imagination or not. It doesn't actually matter. Like, that's just all your trip, your own ego trip. It's in my imagination. It's not in my imagination. It's, are you experiencing something? Yes, I'm experiencing something. Good. That's consciousness happening right now.
Yeah.
What does it matter? It's where there's such a lack of consciousness. You're right. We view these trees and these objects and this microphone. It's just all dead from the perspective of this empirical data standpoint, right? But science is starting to catch up a little bit, especially, you know, brain science and neuroscience, understanding that everything that we see and everything that we interact with in the world is a function of our own unconscious programming, and that's it. So that the whole thing is a conversation. So if we're having a conversation and we think that's a dead tree or a dead microphone, or our place is dead to us, it's not really alive, we can't feel it, we can't hear it, that's somehow a reflection of something that's dead within us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Fully, man. It's yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
Mm.
Yeah. And and then what we become aware of, what we do become conscious of, we're responsible for. And so it can be daunting for people, or terrifying for people, to become aware about what's going on, whether it's conscious of the self or conscious of what's going on in the world, because then you have to be responsible to it.
Mm-hmm.
We're responsible for what we know, for what we're aware of, at least that we hope. Otherwise there's an incredible disintegration that can take place, if we're not valuing what we're aware of. And
Right.
so it can be real easy for numbing out, to not wanting to know, to not wanting to become conscious. And so the question is, like, how to instill such a sense of desire, of thirst, of people wanting to learn, that's
Mm-hmm.
not about fear, that is not fear based,
Right.
but really rooted in our love for something. I mean, I this all starts because I grew up really loving being in a relationship with my backyard. I mean, that's like as simple as it is. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, that's
Mm.
how to make people, especially teenagers, when there is so many luring, seductive um, distractions in teenagers' lives these days that wasn't in mine 20
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And how to pull them out of that, and to have a sense of desire for connection,
Mm.
for becoming aware of themselves, that is a challenge
Yeah.
or I face. And for me, I'm just, I'm just so curious about following my own trip, you know,
Mhm.
my own trip of my 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 deep curiosity about what really makes a human being, or what exactly is culture, and how does initiation fit into that. And all I know is I don't particularly want to do that alone.
Right.
So when people come and they want to join that inquiry or have a collective experimentation with the unknown, um, that's such a beautiful thing, and it's so much stronger than fragmented energy. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd imagine that, if having a young client come see you or something that is immersed in technology and these distractions, I'd imagine that there's that barrier at first. Is that true? Is that something that how do you experience that initial contact?
Well, when it comes to working with clients one-on-one, I mean, there's no technology, like there's no phones aren't allowed when we're spending the next 90 minutes together.
Yeah, yeah. So you put that out right away.
It's just an agreement, it's an agreement. I don't say it quite like I just said it now, but
It's not like a rule.
yeah,
Yeah, an agreement. I understand what you're saying. It's just,
yeah.
yeah, this is how we work together.
um, yeah, to follow curiosity, you know. One way that I've done it is through myth. And in my master's, my master's thesis, I worked with a Russian story. Um, Michael Meade. I'm not sure which one of Michael Meade's books it's in. Maybe Men in the Water of Life, but it's the Firebird story. It has different titles: Firebird and Princess Vasilisa. Um, Basically, it's a male initiate, and within the first, you know, scene of the story, the initiate has already done something that his soul told him not to do. Well, it's not his soul. That his talking horse told him not to do.
Hmm.
One way to look at that is the part of us that deeply knows, what's going to happen if we do something,
Hmm.
and like deeply knows the truth of it. And within the first scene, his horse, he comes upon this feather of the Firebird that's glowing, and he jumps off his horse and is like full of lust and full of desire to pick this up,
Hmm.
And the horse is like, do not do that. Whatever you do not pick up that feather. If you pick up that feather, you will come to know the meaning of trouble and the meaning of fear. Well, what does the kid do? Of course he picks it up, you know?
Hmm.
He tries to outwit. He says, oh, maybe if I pick it up for this reason, I'll be able to pick it up. And bringing that into the context of working with teens can be really powerful, because then they can relate to the character, and it's not all about them.
Hmm.
They can lean into a character, and you can ask them, like, what about this character do you notice?
I love that.
Just in that first scene, they go, wow, this guy, and they start talking about this character, and then it goes, well, does that relate to you in any way? Does that relate to your buddies? How does that relate to our world today?
Mm.
Continue to, because in my mind, adolescence, for me, it was all about wanting to expand. It was all about wanting to lean into the unknown, to really push my edges. And I know the way I did it in all the unhealthy ways. That's what
Me too.
you know.
Yeah.
And but what if we can provide that in a different context? And not only is it leaning into these characters, which are bigger than us, that are a greater story than our own story, provides that sense of expansion that's safe.
Mm.
They can lean into and go, yeah, and get really, really curious. That's one way that I've done it that I think works well working with teens. I mean, and even in that first scene, like he's filled with desire and filled with lust, and granted, it's a feather from the Firebird, which is this mythic bird that very few get to I mean, they only hear about it.
Wow.
A feather of it. So to a degree, it has like there's some type of holy desire in it.
Mm.
There's a holy desire. It's not like desiring to, the desire in itself is rooted in something bigger than himself.
Right. Even though it's forbidden.
Even though it's forbidden, it's rooted in this Firebird, which is why, yeah.
Fascinating. I love that idea of going through the story with a client and having them lean into it and become those parts. And it's so missing. It feels like I love stories, man. I love movies. I love Star Wars. I love Lord of the Rings. I just love stories. I just will eat them up. I'm one of those people. I watch cartoon series because I love stories so much. I don't care how it's played out. I just want a story. And I feel like that next step is having some sort of like deeper reflection or inquiry into that. Like, what is it about this story that I'm obsessed about? Or, why do I love Star Wars? Like, why really do I love that? Is it just this surface level pleasure, or is there a deeper underlying thing happening? You know what I mean?
For sure. And, I think, speaking about Jung, he worked with myth a whole lot. Carl Jung.
Yeah, I love Jung.
There's just so much room to get curious in stories.
Yeah, it really is.
And if we approach them really as living, then they're always changing.
Yes.
Our relationship to them. I mean, even now, speaking about the context I've brought that first scene up of the Firebird story, it's all of a sudden gotten bigger.
Right. Yeah, totally. I could feel like when I heard about the Firebird, inside of me there was something that was like, Firebird, like what is going on? Like, I need to get some of this Firebird in my life. It's amazing. I love, my favorite character of all time is Gandalf. Gray or white, doesn't really matter to me. And I honestly feel like he's like one of my guides or mentors. I know it's like the most silly, it's made up, right? Like, it's clearly a story that this guy wrote. Like, there's no way like Gandalf lived, like, probably, maybe, I don't know. See, I'm still open to it, but man, like, I feel like I could have a conversation with Gandalf and like he could actually, in my imagination, advise me on certain issues or help me with life decisions.
Totally.
It's so interesting how, and maybe that's just because I'm open and creative, but I wonder if other people feel like that about certain characters, like they're actually meaningful to them.
I know that, I think one of my last weekend in EBI, I don't know how much time we have left, but we did a walk on the land. I don't remember the question. We were all walking with a similar question, like, what's the next step in our vision? Or I'm just about completing this training, and what's next? Or how am I going to apply what I've learned? It was all in that area. It was one of the, I don't remember exactly the question, but man, it had just snowed, and I'm walking across, and I'm like having a hard time. I'm like, man, like I'm not feeling connected to this question. Like, I'm kind of not like in a really rich, wild environment. And all of a sudden I saw tracks of a hawk flying low on the snow.
Oh, cool.
For like 30 feet. I'm totally entranced by it. And I track it all the way till, there were no tracks on the ground, so the bird came up. This is in my imagination. And then all of a sudden, boom, the tracks came down. There was 3 drops of blood in the snow.
Oh,
Me
shoot.
to kill
Wow.
birds. It was like some bird parts, you know,
Uh-huh.
and that's actually like a really powerful scene in the story Parsival. Parsival,
Mm.
epic tale, um, and there's this moment where he sees 3 drops of blood in the snow and goes into a total trance. And so, to not get into that story or my story, what I found myself was like in this moment of, oh my gosh, I'm inside this story. Like I am inside the story of Parsival. Is that making sense?
Totally. I love
And
that.
it's that moment where it's not totally a conceptual thing, or it's not something that I'm intentionally working with, but all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the story. Here I am, you know?
So, yeah, so what did you take away?
Oh, um, probably to just keep on riding, man.
Right,
I don't
right.
know how to,
You don't
yeah,
remember the lesson, but it was really vivid in that moment.
it was totally vivid in that moment. And I know from that scene that's a, um, no, I think the biggest takeaway in that moment was what I just shared, of this capacity to, not my capacity, but the like the the capacity of working with story, that we can find ourselves inside of a story.
Oh, I
That was
gotcha.
probably the biggest takeaway, because I don't even remember what.
That's amazing. So it's just the realization that we can live within these paradigms, these
Yeah, and so
stories.
and
Yeah.
that begs the question, like, what story are we in now? And somewhere in, and we're in a scientific story, and our creation is entirely based on Darwinism. And I have some beef with that story. I have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of beef with that story. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the Darwin that you know, the Darwin story of creation.
Mm.
Totally do. And I mean, and that's another conversation perhaps.
Yeah.
It
Part
does beg
two.
the question for, like, what story are we in?
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment on that walk, I all of a sudden found myself in a certain story, going, whoa, this,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Well, I know we only have a minute or two left here, Darren, but um, really just feeling grateful for that idea that you shared about how you know we are so able to live within these stories and these myths and potentially meta myths, myths within myths, and we've become so sterilized. There's this sterilization that happens when we try to confine everything to this quantifiable equation or truth. And so to take a leap of faith and be like, you know what, living in the narrative of story and imagination and possibility and meaning is actually better. It's better than the reductionist way of viewing life.
it's way better.
It's better. It's more meaningful. It doesn't even matter if it's true or not. It's just better. It's a better way to live. I mean, who gives a damn if it's empirically provable? What matters is, like, when I experience these things, I feel meaning. I feel joy. I feel purpose. It makes me a better person. I show up for my life in a different way.
Exactly.
I haven't learned anything from reductionism. It hasn't, other than like some facts, some cool facts about the world, but there's been no life wisdom.
Exactly. Yeah, with those facts, we think we can take possession of life. We think
Mm-hmm.
we got it. We think we have it understood. It's no longer living. It's not a river. We're no longer rowing down the river of life with total curiosity and potential.
Mm.
It's like, oh, I got this fact I can put in my pocket. That's figured out. It's done. It's got a name. It's been explained. It's flat. It's mine.
We know what it is. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think that the ongoing conversation will be more of that next time. I want to know more about the story. I want to know more about the curiosity. I want to see how you solve or how you continue to develop some ideas with some of these issues that you're wrestling with initiation for teens and stuff like that. And I feel like there's just so much there. There's so much rich conversation there. So thank you for coming on and for putting up with me. It was a little choppy in a couple of different parts, but I got a lot out of it, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's such an honor to be here with you, and through this medium, and get to converse a little bit. And I'd love to be we'll have another conversation like this again.
I got to take you up on that because it's been really fun. Where do people go if they want to work with you or check your stuff out? DarrenSilver.earth, is that?
Yeah, Darren, DarrenSilver.earth
Okay.
is a website. And then I got another project going on. It's called Heart of Nature. So it'd be heartofnature.us.
Okay.
It's another project. And yeah, if you're local to the Boulder area, then tell stories, different locations, and certainly at Star House up Sunshine Canyon, and yeah.
I wonder if people would be interested in hearing you tell a story sometime.
I'm getting ready. I leave tomorrow morning to do a vision quest at a modern monastery, if you will, in Vermont, and one of the monks, that's one of their favorite things. Were you gonna tell some stories?
Really?
Oh, totally.
Oh, good luck on your quest, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so I love telling stories. It's something I get far more inspired in the wintertime.
Okay, well then I'll schedule for the wintertime for a story. I'll do it right before bedtime too. Bedtime story. Right on, Darren. Well, I will put links to your websites in the description here, and I'll add a little couple sentences from your bio, and hopefully we can do this again soon and have an awesome quest.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan.
All right.